Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Oliver Dowden.
Well, good evening, everyone, and I stand here before you this evening, not just as Deputy Prime Minister, not just as a proud Hertfordshirean, I don't know that's the right word, my entire life, but also, of course, as the Member of Parliament for Hertsmere, but above all of those things, as a deeply proud friend of Israel. And I find it extraordinary standing here in 2023 when I reflect on the warmth and vibrancy of our Jewish community across all of Hertfordshire, but particularly here in Hertsmere, with the thriving shawls which bring so much joy to our community, whether it's here in Boreham Wood, whether it's in Radlett, whether it's in Bushy, whether it's in Shenley, bringing generations together. I find it extraordinary. I have to start with these words, but I feel I have to say it. Jewish lives matter. That in an extraordinary rare act of bipartisanship, Labour, the Liberal Democrats, the Conservatives, can all stand here and say that what we saw in Israel was an act of terror, and yet our own national broadcaster, whose fees we all pay, stand here united in confronting this, and we see proudly flown over Downing Street, projected onto Downing Street, projected onto our civic offices, the flag of Israel at its darkest hour for the state of Israel. Why can our own football association not do it? Such heartening unity, and I've seen this in the House of Commons. I saw it yesterday and today, on Monday and today. That unity between parties. We still have more to do to ensure that unity of every institution in our nation. But there is, across the country, a silent majority who look on this with a sense of abhorrence, not just because it's an attack on Israel, not just because it's an attack on the Jewish people, it's because it is an attack on every single one of us, on every value that we hold dear. It's an attack on peace. It's an attack on democracy. It's an attack on basic humanity, and that is why it has shocked everyone to their very core. And it is sadly the case that throughout history, and as a Jewish friend of mine said to me earlier today, the Jewish people have sadly, throughout history, been the canaries in the coal mine. What happens to people in Israel, what happens to the Jewish community, if we do not stand robust in the face of it, it will surely happen to every single person. And that's why you have heard from the Prime Minister, and indeed the Prime Minister will shortly be making his way to Israel. You have heard from the government, you have heard from parties across the political spectrum, an unambiguous statement of Israel's right to self-defence. But that right to self-defence can't just be said. First of all, it needs to be demonstrated, and that's what we're doing. We're sharing intelligence with our friends in the State of Israel. We are deploying assets to assist the State of Israel in understanding what is going on in Gaza right now through the deployment of RAF planes to enable us to get a better intelligence picture. And that offer again will be made by our Prime Minister when he meets Prime Minister Netanyahu for the third time, probably tomorrow. But it's about more than that. This is going to be a long and difficult conflict. And it's going to test all of us. And what we have to bear in mind, we have to stick to, is the feeling that we have now, we can't allow it to fade away. And that is the fear, that the strength of feeling now will not be the strength of feeling when the reality of this conflict comes to pass. It is not an easy task to take out terrorists who willfully hide themselves amongst not only the civilian population, but amongst the most precious assets of that civilian population, whether it's schools or hospitals or other places where young people and children congregate. That is the nature of the shameful enemy that Israel has to confront right now. And therein lies the difference. Therein lies the fundamental difference between Israel and its enemies. Israel seeks to do everything it can to minimise and to warn against civilian casualties. Hamas does precisely the opposite. They go out of their way to murder every single man, woman, child and baby they encounter. There is zero moral equivalence between Hamas and Israel. The National Security Council in which I sit. That is why in meetings of the Cabinet and across the whole government, we will not waver in our support for Israel to defend itself. But there's another agenda going on here. What Hamas also want is that the fear that they have inculcated in Israel, they want spread onto the streets of this country. And I find it heartbreaking that friends, school children, fear to go to school, disguise their own religion, cover up the Star of David around their neck. We cannot allow this country to become a cold house for British Jews. And that's why we will be robust in policing. It is absolutely clear when people stand up and they talk about the river to the sea. We know what they're talking about. They're talking about denying the state of Israel, and that should be called out for what it is and policed in an appropriate fashion. And that's why we have given those resources to the wonderful Community Security and Safety Trust. I thank them once again for everything they've done, not just today, but I see it every day, day in, day out, defending our community and defending our values. Our Home Secretary, the police, and our local police will stand shoulder to shoulder in doing everything we can to protect our local community. Friends, I want to end on a note of hope. Because for me, the state of Israel embodies that vision of hope. It embodies that vision of freedom. It embodies that vision of democracy. It's one of the very few places in the world where you can freely express your religion, you can freely express your sexuality, you can freely express your political beliefs. It is a cherished state, and we must hold firm to that beacon. And when we look at threats to Israel, and many people have talked about the comparison with the dark days of the Second World War, there is one enormous difference now. And there's an enormous difference to the Jewish people, and there's an enormous difference to the world. There is a state of Israel. That state of Israel has an army that will defend it, and that state of Israel has true friends and allies around the world, including in this United Kingdom, and together we will prevail, we will defeat this terrorism, and we will keep that flame of hope and light burning in that part of the world, not just for weeks to come or months to come, but for generations and centuries to come, because it is morally the right thing to do.